Hi everyone and welcome to my Season 11 feedback video. I've been playing the season up until now, so since the Paladin launched early December all the way to now, it's been like 6 weeks or something like that, or 7. I had a big subathon that was pretty massive and had a lot of support, so thank you all for that who were there, who supported me. And overall I just played this season probably more than any other in Diablo 4 so far. So overall it was a pretty good season, I think we can say. It seems like the vibes were really good. Everyone had a ton of fun, I think, and I've of course played the Paladin a lot. I wanted to get the rank 1 for the leaderboards and this kind of stuff. I've been grinding, and there was a lot of stuff to explore with the game revamps, the elite changes, and so on. So I have like a short list of topics that I want to go through here a little bit, and let's see where we're going from here. Let's see what the devs will do in the next update. So we have Season 12 coming and then the expansion. So obviously we're just kind of getting started. So it's quite exciting times ahead. Before we continue with the video, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsor, boot.dev. They've created a platform that makes it easier than ever to get into programming and polish your skills. They believe that the easiest way to learn code is to make sure that you're never bored, and this is why they have designed their courses to feel more like a game and less like a chore. The only way to really get into programming is to get your hands busy and write a ton of code, and this is exactly what the tasks allow you to do without ever feeling like you're getting stuck, because they have tons of tools to help you out. In these courses, you're going to learn backend programming from start to finish in the Python and Go languages. As you may know, programmers have huge earning potential. In the US, the median is upwards of 100K per year. And additionally, they can very often work from home, which is very convenient. And what I find really admirable about boot.dev is that they really follow their mission. Even for people that don't have the means to pay for a membership, they offer all of their content for free to read and watch. The paid membership only unlocks the interactivity and the game that goes with the programs. Compared to attending a university course, boot.dev is a way cheaper solution and allows you the flexibility of doing it all at your own pace and from home. They offer both a monthly and annual subscription, and you can cancel in the first 30 days, no questions asked. So if you really want to learn coding and that convinces you, then go check out boot.dev with the link in the description or the pinned comment below, and you get 25% off your first payment to boot.dev by clicking that link or using my code. And now, let's go back to the video. Now let's talk about the Paladin, the big new thing, I guess, that came with the season, outside of the entire game changing, I guess, with like, Masterwork, Temper as well, and so on. But let's talk about the Paladin first. So I had a ton of fun with the Paladin. I played it more than any other class, of course. I wanted to try out as many builds as possible. And I also was pushing for the rank 1 on the leaderboard and this kind of stuff. So I was like grinding, and I've done like 20 different builds on this class or something like that. So overall, I think we can definitely see a bit of like a precursor of what's to come with the expansion. We had a little teaser that was in the like expansion trailer with like the new skill trees and so on, and the Paladin clearly has like a new design already behind it, but that is also about to change in a pretty big way again in the expansion. So it's kind of like in between now with like old and new skill tree mixed together, but overall the way that the skill trees are designed are definitely way better on the Paladin compared to any other class. We have the 3 options for each skill, and most of them are pretty impactful, like, really big changes of how the skill functions, converting it into other skill types and these kind of things. So that was really fun. And well, if you get this kind of stuff for all of the other classes and more, in 3 months, everyone is going to be like a Paladin and even crazier, right? I think that's going to be really cool. So build diversity is definitely extremely good on the Paladin, outside of like, some builds just being like more dominant than others, but you can make just about anything work and have your pick from your playstyle. So I think that worked out really well. And with like, relatively universal like aspects and Paragon boards and the passives and so on, most of the builds actually ended up in a relatively comparable power level. Then of course you have the power level. The power level of Paladin is extremely ridiculous. So it's not like Spiritborn Giga bucket level of like just one-shot 150 bosses with like 7 layers of double dipping. But obviously Paladin is like the DLC balance, right? So they want to sell a class, they're going to make it OP, and they've done it pretty shamelessly. But I guess it also contributed to like a lot of people coming back to the game, and the game just got a lot harder with like the elite changes and so on. So I guess it makes sense to make it a little bit easier as well for people that haven't really played in a while. But of course, long term at least, Paladin needs some changes. There's definitely too much power here, too crazy multipliers and so on. They need to come down a little bit in order to make this more reasonable compared to like all the other classes. But yeah, it was like fun, right? You just log in on Paladin into your OP, and I think everyone had like a really good time because of this. So that was kind of fun to see. But for my tastes, I guess we kind of like trivialized most of the game a little too easily, especially with like Oradin and stuff like that. So literally like AFKing on hardcore in Torment 4, and nothing in the game can kill me besides maybe Belial Breath, but he wouldn't ever live long enough to do it. So yeah, that's a bit too much, I think. So yeah, overall, like, and the Paladin power is a bit too crazy, and it kind of like trivializes the entire progression way too soon and so on. So that was a bit too much, but I'm going to talk more about this in a second. And yeah, of course, with expansion 2 coming, where will Paladin go? I guess we'll see. It'll probably just land somewhere with like the other classes, as I just said earlier. The like new skill trees, and then there's more options for all the skills, and that will come to all of the classes. I think there's a lot of stuff that is going to be really cool to see. So I'm excited to just dive in and find out what the Blizzard actually has done with all of the other classes in the same design of what the Paladin offers. And for example, if legendary aspects also get revamped, if unique items get revamped in the same way as they work on the Paladin, where we have like more generic stuff, more and less of just like very like like big constraints on just like using one skill and that is like all of your damage. On the Paladin, it definitely worked a lot better sometimes, where okay, you had a build based on a certain thing, but you could also still feel the impact of some other skills here and there. When you press Arbiter and you jump into a pack in Torment 4, the pack would actually explode, right? It would actually take damage from your 120-second cooldown. Even though it's mostly just like a buff skill and you just don't really do much of it. But sometimes this is like really lacking from other classes, I think, where you have like utility skills, let's say a ground stomp on a barb or something like that, and it just doesn't really benefit from like half your damage multipliers. So you walk into a pack, you press ground stomp, and just nothing happens. Yeah, that doesn't really feel that great, I think. And if you ever want to go back to some sort of like multi-skill setups, like I always like to cite the old like Kratos Barb from Season 0, or the Flurry F Rogue, on these kind of things, Pen RF. They were like really cool builds of like hybrids and multiple skills. I don't say that every build has to be that, but it would be cool if we get closer to a scenario where this is actually a real possibility, compared to what we have now, where aspects, tempers, uniques kind of force us way too much into stacking only one modifier and only one skill, for example. So I would really like to see a lot more in that direction of what the Paladin is offering here. And then we have the progression. So we had a pretty big revamp here. So Temper, Masterwork, difficulty revamps, elite revamps. I think overall that was a pretty good success. So the temper changes, I think, were pretty universally appraised. We just like picked the temper, and then they also added this GA temper, which I really like. I'm a big fan of that. And it just kind of feels good, you boom, hit a GA. It just has like some nice, very small gamba. But yeah, it's like easy enough to hit, but it's not like completely trivial. So you have to farm the scrolls, which are kind of tough. The main thing that I kind of had an issue with when it comes to the crafting was just like the number of clicks and the UIs, and they're also slow, very annoying, especially in the Sanctification season. So I can maybe like jump over to this a little bit as well. It takes so much time to just make items. And I think this can be like cut back by like 80% at least by just like removing confirmation windows, allowing us to just like chain imprint an entire inventory, allowing us to like chain temper with like a hotkey. I want like a craft hotkey, for example, just so I can like, repeat the same thing or something like that I've already done, repeat the same temper, repeat the same masterwork, repeat the same imprint, repeat the sockets, and then just like ding, 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 go through the inventory. So this is something I think is really lacking. The quality of life is abysmal when it comes to making items, but the systems at least are much better. So I think that is kind of nice. And the main gripe I have with like how this is going though is I feel like we kind of get everything way too soon into the progression. So what I mean is that, you know, you very quickly get legendary temper manuals. You very quickly max out your masterworking. And I think that should maybe be stretched out a bit more to have like a, you know, a better power curve as you go through the torment levels. Because right now we kind of like go into torment 1, we kill a few bosses, get like some crucial unique for our build, and even the non-paladin classes just kind of like end up in torment 4 pretty soon. You know, Paladin is just like born in torment 4, but the other classes as well. You get like 1 or 2 really important items on like the good builds at least, and then you start one-shotting everything in torment 4. And I think this is kind of like too much. There's too much of a shortcut here with like just like skipping entire torment levels basically with very few upgrades. So I want this to be like more drawn out. I want, for example, legendary temper manuals to maybe only drop when like in torment 3 plus or something like that. And the rares only drop when in torment 1 plus and these kind of things. I think that something like that would make a lot more sense, where you have like a bit more of like a stretched out like progression curve. And this can also be similar with, for example, uniques. You know, why does every unique drop in Torment 1? Why is a Capelec in Torment 1 and a Rotting Lightbringer or a Dawnfire, for example? I think all these kind of like really crazy OP items could be coming online a little bit later, so that you have more steps of progression, you know, a bit more fiddling with your setup until you actually get to the point where you're like completely online. And then we also have the elites revamp here. So I think that was also relatively good. So we have more interesting elites. We have like a blue packs now. We have champion packs of minions. They have better affixes. They're more interesting. But it's definitely a bit of like a clusterfuck, to be honest, when it comes to especially pushing content and like, you know, content where you have like multiple elites at once and they don't just instantly evaporate. Then it gets pretty messy, pretty fast. So I think visual clarity is definitely a huge issue. There's also like some elite affixes that are just like pretty overtuned. I think explosive comes to mind. It cannot be dodged, it cannot be blocked, and it does by far the most damage out of all of the affixes. So I think a lot of people that were playing Paladin this season definitely noticed this. This was definitely like the #1 like hardcore killer, I would say. And I think it's fine for an effect like this to be that crazy, but you know, maybe it should be a bit more in line with other affixes. So it either needs to come down or there needs to be some other like overall tuning. We also had like a lot of bugs when it comes to some elite affixes. So sometimes they just like shoot certain affixes like 10 times more than they should. So I have this screenshot here, for example, of like a Soul Blade enemy just like shooting 20 of them at once. And this can happen with Mortar. This has happened to me with Fire Enchanted. And then they just get like absolutely one shot and like boom, you know. And especially in hardcore, this is definitely a bad experience. And these bugs definitely need to be fixed. And yeah, in general, like maybe a bit more tuning and so on should be done here when it comes to that. But overall, I'm relatively happy, I guess, with where the elites landed. And I think maybe they should be like a bit more interesting. In terms of, for example, also the combat itself, I feel like most of the time it's just like devolved a little bit too much into like tank and spank and then just hope for the best. So I would like to see a little bit more dynamic here, a little bit more like kind of like spread when it comes to like longer fights. And not just, okay, you just get to the point where you have like this like toughness breakpoint basically where you live. And then you just kind of ignore everything. So it needs to be, you know, a little bit more dynamic, maybe like, you know, combinations of affixes that can sometimes make a fight really tough, but not to the point where I just like get absolutely blasted from like some weird bug because there's like 200 Soul Blades, right? So there needs to be some kind of like middle ground here that makes it a bit more exciting. And I think then this will be fine. Then we also have the Endgame Loop. So in particular, I want to talk about Asmodan here. So we had like a lot of focus on not Pit this time around, basically. They nerfed the Pit. There's basically almost no obols, almost no XP. And that is probably a step backwards in my book. So I think this is not a good way to go forward. I think the Pit needs to become actually a more important system, not a less important system. And the main problem that we have with the Pit is that it's like way too unrewarding to go higher, and you basically get no benefit from going up in tiers. You get the minimal amount of extra XP and loot and stuff like that after like a certain level. So once you're at the point where you can like easy peasy plus Torment 4, then yeah, you can do anything between like Pit 60, 70, 80, 90, it doesn't matter really, because the rewards just don't scale at all. And that is really bad, because in the end, it's like kind of the only system that really scales up with like our endgame characters post Torment 4. Since we don't have any extra difficulties. So I think there needs to be more focus put on the Pit, but also the Pit, first of all, needs to become more fun, right? So the Pit is just like not interesting to farm for a long amount of time. And this is something that I guess we expect to see in the expansion with like the wall plans and also with what the devs talked about with, for example, porting back that new tower tech into the pit. And then also now that we have the two systems, they will split them. So, the pit will go in one way and the tower will go another way from where they are pretty close together right now. So I definitely have pretty high hopes for this, but I want to kind of get this out early and just say, okay, we need a way more interesting pit. And it's not just done with, fixing the backtracking and fixing the map generation a little bit. This needs to be like a real, like kind of end game, like, kind of like the final steps sort of system where we will spend most of our time after the first like 50 to 100 hours of playing the game, regularly doing all the other stuff. I don't mind doing a lot of other content. I actually like that. But I think at some point with like kind of just limited Torment 4 difficulty at least, the pit is like the only thing that can be interesting, and right now it's just not. So this needs to change. But besides that, I think it was kind of cool as well to kind of like do some other game loop as well. We had like this world boss farming, and then you go to Undercity, and then you go do some lair bosses, and then you go back to Asmodan, and you had a kind of this like loop of going back and forth between these activities, sustaining the keys. But yeah, speaking of keys, I think we got a little bit too much this season when it comes to like the divine gifts. Spitting out like 80 Nightmare Dungeon sigils per world boss, and you had like an infinite Ascendance. I have like 5 stacks of Ascendance tributes right now in my stash, and Radiance tributes as well, and this kind of stuff. Like, I really don't want that many keys, to be honest. And okay, I've played a lot and so on, but like literally printing like handful of Ascendance keys on a single boss or something is insane. So I think these keys need to be like more rare. They need to be more exciting when you get them. They need to be just better loot as well when you get them. So I want less keys and better keys, for example, like, like minus 90% keys, but make them like twice as good or something. I think that would feel a lot better. And, like I don't want to like kind of feel so obligated, I guess, using all my Ascendance keys. And, I just want to use them all. And whenever I find them, like kind of like rarely, sometimes you just find that thing and you're like feeling happy about it. So that's, I think, a much better way to go about it. Now let's talk about Sanctification. So Sanctification is a system that I was really advocating for a long time. I told the devs over and over again, please bring Val Orbs into Diablo 4. We have so many like just like copy pasta items, and this would be like the perfect thing. And they've finally done it. So I'm quite happy with the general implementation of this. And I think a lot of people really had good time like trying to gamba on their gear, and well, sometimes it breaks, but it was very, very lenient, to be fair. I think for like a long-term system, which I think this should absolutely become, this probably needs to be a little bit less crazy. And yeah, I guess we'll see in terms of like bricking items and stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to brick items if, for example, Sanctification is harder to do and it's like more rare to get the materials, or maybe items are just generally more rare. So in that case, I think it would be okay to like not brick items necessarily. But yeah, with the way it generally worked, I think I was kind of happy. Now, one thing is like the Mythic Sanctifications. Mythic Sanctifications were really fun to chase, I gotta say, and I have done plenty of those the entire season. I've been like trying, and I got like 10 times Grandfather, I got 10 times Starters, I got like everything many times. And of course, I've been slamming like a few thousand items, so there were plenty of opportunities. But yeah, it was like on one hand really cool to chase that, but on the other hand also kind of like really punishing when you really tried and just didn't have any way to like force it, any way to like, help with the RNG or anything like that. And I think the main problem that really comes down to is that there's like too much of a power gap between like the GG outcomes and like the kind of like average outcome. You have the option to get like 200 strength or 10% attack speed, or double damage with Grandfather, right? So that is a bit too crazy. The gap is too much. So I kind of like the GG outcomes being really crazy, but there needs to be like more stuff in the middle. There needs to be like, okay, this is like, you get like some small stuff early on, and then you kind of like, build up towards like some middle step maybe. And then maybe, at some point you get lucky and you also have the Mythic, and it's like not like this gigantic gap between having that Mythic and not having it, right? There needs to be like a little bit of like a progression, or a little bit of like a, like a more evened out scale, I guess. But besides that, I really want to see Sanctifications be a part of the game. And yeah, like coming back into the next season, for example, or in the expansion or something. Yeah, with some tweaks, I think this would be an excellent addition to the rest of the game. Now let's talk about the tower here. So this is like the most recent implementation, and I guess most people probably haven't really like tried it too much since it came very late in the season. I did do a really big video on this, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But TLDR is too many bugs, too many exploits. It's very undercooked. And it was fun to, I was blasting for like a little while. I pushed like 3 different characters, and I ended up on like rank 1 and rank 2 on 2 classes and rank 6 on another. And that was really fun and stuff. But it was, yeah, there's like too many problems basically. And the main issue I have with this is also that, after all those problems are fixed, there needs to be more dynamic. There needs to be a reason for me to come back when the leaderboard resets the next week and the week after that and the week after that. Like my character will just be done like after a week or 2 into the season, or maybe 3, and then I have like no reason to go into the tower again after I've done one push once. Like it's like the same tier, the same character, the same RNG, nothing really changes. I just like prove that I still got it. I don't know, like, like what's the point really, right? So there needs to be something that actually changes from reset to reset. So I would like to see something like a Mythic Plus style system, like, multiple affixes that randomize every single week or something, and then they're just like fixed for that week, for example. So I talked more about this in my other video. But something like that I think needs to happen for the tower long term at least, in order to make this like an exciting system. And then, there can also be like, cool rewards in there, and, like a real reason for not just like the #1 blasters or something, but everyone to actually participate in a tower, at least a little bit, like once in a week, go in, do a run or 2. Why not, right? So I think this would be kind of cool then. And lastly, I want to talk about class balance. So obviously I talked about this earlier with the Paladin. Paladin is overtuned as hell, but we also shouldn't really neglect the other classes as much as they did in this patch. Yeah, some classes at least had like some pretty decent builds, but I think the Necros had it the worst by far. I didn't even make a Necro, it's like the only class I didn't play. At least the other classes usually had like 1 or 2 really decent builds. But compared to like Paladins, like 20 builds, yeah, that is not really on the same level, right? So there should be maybe like another 1 or 2 options per class at least that is like, fun, comfy and just good and kind of like a feels good man experience. I think there was like too little of that on other classes. So I played like 1 or 2 builds on almost the other classes, and that was about it. And yeah, even with just like people that, for example, don't have the Paladin or don't want to play the Paladin, even though they have the Lot of Hate pre-order, it would be nice if they had a little bit of more builds to look forward to. So I think that was like definitely too neglected, especially with like the PDR testing where we didn't have a Paladin, and all of the class testing being done and the balancing being done, it just ended up being kind of like for nothing almost, because yeah, it seems like they focus too much on the Paladin and too little on making the other classes actually more exciting. But maybe you can forgive them because the season was pretty good. And well, expansion 2 is around the corner, right? So every class is going to be a Paladin very soon and more. So maybe it's all right for now. But at least for like the kind of like interim season coming up with season 12, I would really like to see, at least something exciting for the classes, right? So some reason to log in on a Necro, some reason to log in on a Spiritborn and a Barb and so on. That is not just like the same build we already had for 4 seasons again, right? So that would be nice. So let me know what you think, and how did you experience the season? What did you play? What is something that I should have maybe talked about more, or some other points you have? I also like constantly give like written feedback to the devs as well, so I can definitely read the comments and maybe pass on something as well if I didn't really talk about it now. So that about sums it up for me. Let me know what you think. And another thank you to Boo.dev for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you guys next time.